Hey, welcome to episode 1 of our read-along book club of Donald Ray Pollock's Knockemstiff, a book that I am thoroughly enjoying. I'm sure you know if you're on my Discord. Hey, you're not on my Discord? You should check it out. The link is in the description below. It is completely free to join. There is a channel dedicated to this read-along where we can discuss it in more detail. But before we begin, I think it's important to discuss the fact that Knockemstiff is actually a real place. It has a different name, it goes by different names, and there's an interesting, a colorful story behind how the town got its name, which we were exposed to in one of these stories here. But let us check out the Wikipedia entry first, and we see that it's also known as Glen Shade or Shady Glen. It is in the southernmost area, well, the southern region of Ohio. And the picture here, I think, speaks volumes. It looks like a road with some branching roads, maybe. Not really much here to speak of. You see a house over here that has no foundation whatsoever. Needless to say, this is not a sprawling metropolis of any kind, and I'm sure you realize that already from reading so far, because we have a map, in fact. Donald Ray Pollock, according to the description of this book, he based it on his experiences in Knockemstiff. He is a native of, I believe it was Meade County, which is also featured in The Devil All the Time, the novel, and the movie by Netflix. If you've seen the movie and enjoyed it, please read the book. It is so much better. I feel like the connectivity of the stories and how all of their paths intertwined is done so much better. And again, I don't want to fault the filmmakers too much because we're dealing with just the constraints of film timing. On to the book we go. Let us start at the very beginning, where we have an epigraph that states, "All Americans come from Ohio originally, if only briefly." I briefly looked up who Dawn Powell was. She was a writer as well from the area, a satirist, if you will. And then we get a map, which is very unique, I feel like, to something that is literary fiction, a Southern Gothic, not fantasy, I guess you could say. And so we see the map here of where all these characters are from, or most of them anyway. And this is actually the first time I've looked at it. I'm reading on Kindle, and so I just went straight to the story. I didn't even bother to check this out, but this is really cool, and I think I'm gonna have to flip back to this for more context. So the first story we're going to talk about is real life, and first you can see there's a lot of highlights here. I kind of slowed down because I was realizing quickly that I was going to highlight this entire story because there's just so many great lines in this thing, and you'll see that I move on to the other two stories that I highlight far fewer times. But anyway, I love this story so much because it delivers on its promise of the first line being, "My father showed me how to hurt a man one August night at the Torch Drive-In when I was 7 years old." And we get to see that in very grisly detail. But anyway, this is very reminiscent. I think why I like this story so much too is because when I was a kid, way back, there was a drive-in. There was a drive-in called the Crest Drive-In. And I remember my dad had this 1971 El Camino. We'd throw sleeping bags in the back. Some of my friends would come as well. We'd get snacks, maybe we'd get pizza, and we'd roll up this gravelly dirt road. We'd pay our $5 or whatever it was at the time. And just like in this story, there's these metal posts with these metal speakers, right, that you just hook on the side of your car, your door, whatever it is. The one difference being here is that he's in a car. He's not in El Camino. So we'd reverse the car around. We'd get folding chairs too if we needed to, but most of the time we just lay down in the back, and it was a good time for sure. And I even remember the details of the cinder block building where you'd go to get snacks, and there's a trough there where all these dudes are pissing in. So needless to say, it was kind of a flashback for me, this story. So it was off to a great start, but let us move on to more highlights. So the first amazing first line, I totally was hooked immediately. And then it continues. Even the second paragraph, it was hotter than a fat lady's box that evening. And I highlighted this next part because I've noticed that I just really love the specificity in his writing. He uses very specific things, like when the guy's eating a Zero bar in the bathroom, I believe. And those are things we're taught in writing. Be specific. Don't be general with things. Don't say a car. Say like a Toyota Corolla or something like that. And that's what he's doing here. And this is just such a weird thing where he's sweating, but he's sopping up his head with a brown paper bag. I mean, the fact that he's using a brown paper bag and not a towel or not a handkerchief or something like that, or even a paper towel, that speaks volumes about what's going on here. And then this next part, I mean, this thing is killing me. 3 paragraphs in, and I'm dying. "Hey, Vernon, watch this." This is his mother. She said that night, ever since we parked, she'd been trying to show the old man she could stick a hot dog down her throat without messing up her shiny lipstick. I mean, what the hell is going on here? And then his reaction too. "But every time she gagged on that wiener, the ropey muscles in the back of my old man's neck twisted a little tighter, made it seem as if his head was going to pop off any second." So I don't know why his mom is deep throating hot dogs here. But anyway, here we go. I guess toward the end of the story, you kind of know what's going on here. Moving on, we have an interesting character feature of this young man. So there I was, stuck in the back seat by myself, chewing the skin off my fingers and hoping mom wouldn't piss him off too much before Godzilla stomped the guts out of Tokyo. So they're sitting here, they're getting ready for Godzilla to start. He's chewing on his fingers, not on his fingernails, which I think is funny too, because later on his dad gets pissed off at him about, hey, stop biting your fingernails. You sound like a rat chewing a corn sack or something like that. And it was interesting how his mom just interjected with like, hey, that's not what he's doing anyway. So not that she was necessarily trying to stick up for him, but she was just trying to oddly correct him on it. And we move on to find out how much his father hates movies and screw a bunch of make-believe, he said. What the hell's wrong with real life? And I think that really speaks to older generations about how sometimes they don't understand the value of something like this when they're not accustomed to it. We learned that cars are very important to this family because they can't quite afford it, but they do. It was a third set of wheels this year. We lived on soup, beans, and fried bread, but drove around Knockemstiff like rich people, which is kind of funny because, you know, they're just trying to present themselves in a certain light, despite the fact that they don't quite fit that. And in fact, they're failing to pay their bills. But I highlighted this because, man, this was just another highly descriptive passage. I was sitting in front of the dead TV watching watery blood trickle down her pale calves. She tried to shave them with the old man's straight razor, but her legs were like sticks of butter. A black fly kept buzzing around her bony ankles, dodging her mad slaps. Another thing, like I keep repeating this, but the specificity in this, and some may argue that that's overly descriptive, but man, that immediately puts me in a certain mental state. I can see this clearly before my eyes, and I think it's highly effective. But it's not always like that. I feel like he's really selective when it comes to those kinds of descriptions. It's not like we're reading these overly long passages of description over and over and over again. You can tell that he's only using it for when it really matters. And another highlight here, when for a few minutes he stared at the screen and sank slowly into the padded upholstery like a setting sun. It's funny because as crude as a lot of this writing is, there's a lot of beauty to it, and there's a lot of subtext to it, which I can appreciate. It really just is illuminating so much about the characters, and they're extremely colorful characters in this book. And this is what I was talking about earlier. So, God damn it, boy, how many times I got to tell you about biting them fingernails? You sound like a mouse chewing through a fucking sack of corn. And then, leave him be, Vernon, my mother said. That ain't what he does anyway. Funny exchange there. Like she was kind of defending him, but kind of not, just correcting her husband almost, Vernon. We all know that Bobby and Vernon got to go take a leak next. And this is, I highlighted this because this just really hit me. Like I saw my childhood flash before my eyes when the cinder block building in the middle of this drive-in lot was swarming with people. The loud, rattling projector was up front, the concession stand in the middle, and the Johns in the back. The smell of piss and popcorn hung in the hot, dead air like insecticide. In the restroom, a row of men and boys leaned over a long green metal trough with their dicks hanging out. And it always threw me off about this. I don't know. Around where I live, there's kind of these off-the-beaten-path places you go where there might be a restaurant or something, and it never fails. There'll be a bathroom with a fucking trough right in the middle, no dividers, and everything is hanging out literally. And I remember that they had the same thing in the drive-in I went to. I am very grounded in this story. That's one thing. It really, I was laughing the entire time. I was just having these nostalgic visions in my head. It was a good time. And I think what's interesting next about this part is you kind of hate Vernon, right? You hate the dad. He's such an asshole, right, to his kid. And then there's an opportunity where you're thinking, okay, he's gonna get what's coming to him, right? There's this massive dude in the bathroom who says, like, you know, hey, shut the fuck up, don't talk to him that way. And I love it because that's when the entire story turns. That's when the scene turns. So Vernon, you know, he just kind of like backs away. He's like, hey man, sorry, I didn't mean anything by it. The guy turns around and then he just sucker punches him and beats the complete shit out of him while he falls on the ground, or after he falls on the ground. And I think there's a line in here where something about, he said he saw his dad take down a horse with a punch like that once. And the next part I highlighted was his reaction to his dad telling him he he did a good job. So it was the only goddamn thing my old man ever said to me that I didn't try to forget. Donald Ray Pollock's stories in here are just brimming with interesting lines like that. But what's funny for the rest of the story, he's, you know, he goes home, he's in bed, he's woken up, his dad's drunk, he's vomiting, and then, you know, even though the fact that his dad's an asshole, he punched his wife in the car, and so she's just battered as well as the guy in the bathroom, and then they go have sex, right? So I think the hot dog thing sort of comes full circle at this point. So it's just an interesting collection of characters, and how you have this husband and this wife who coexist, right, in a way where it's an abusive relationship. The guy sounds like a complete asshole, but they find common ground somehow. I don't know if it's because they're just stay together for circumstance, because, you know, they can't picture any other life. Maybe it's a religious thing. Maybe it's a money thing. Who knows? But it's just funny to see these characters that hate each other but then seem to love each other. Or maybe they're just using each other because that's all they have left. And so as Bobby is lying in bed here, his parents' bed thumped loudly against the floor in the next room. I lapped the blood off his knuckles. The dried flakes dissolved in my mouth, turning my spit to syrup. Even after I'd swallowed all the blood, I kept licking my hands. I tore at the skin with my teeth. I wanted more. I would always want more. Beautiful, beautiful first chapter. I know there's like stories, but this felt like an opening chapter to me. And these are the kind of first chapters, honestly, that I would love to emulate. Not copy exactly, but they suck you in immediately. It's a story on its own. And I know this is a story, but this is what I argue a lot, is I feel like a lot of times chapters need to be their own stories. And that's why I love this so much, because it feels like a chapter. It feels like such a great hook scene. It pulls you into the world. You know these kind of characters you're dealing with, but it's also speaking of bigger things, right? Larger things about violence, about how you can affect your kids, about how violent people can coexist with each other. They may love each other, they may not, but that's just the world they live in. And this was such a great story. So let me know, what did you think? Are there any details I missed here? Are there any kind of notes you have on the reading that I didn't pick up on? Let me know in the comments below, or join our Discord. So the next one is Dynamite Hole, and this one was pretty goddamn crazy. It is about a man named Jake who was dodging the draft, and he went off to the holler, which I had to look up. I didn't know what that was. So the holler apparently is the hollow. That's what it means, and it's just called the holler because of the dialect, I guess, in the place, which means like the valley between two mountains. And so that is, they allude to that a lot in this story as well as other ones. But here we go. The first line highlighted of Dynamite Hole. I was coming down off the Mitchell Flats with 3 arrowheads in my pocket, and a dead copperhead hung around my neck like an old woman's scarf when I caught a boy named Truman McKay fucking his own little sister in Dynamite Hole. And again, that's how you write a first line, guys. But you're still wondering, like, who is this guy? We don't know his name yet. And I think that's another thing to note, is that a lot of these, you don't really know the person's name, particularly the third story, where I think it's quite a bit in before you even know who the character is. Is it Jake? Is it Bobby grown up? We don't really know. But in this one, as we know, we had this guy who he dodged the draft of, I believe it was World War II. He went off to the hills essentially, and his dad allowed him to have his bibs and I think a knife, maybe a couple knives, something like that. And this guy just like lived in the hills for a long time, and he came upon these 2 kids having sex, and he knew who they were, and he knew that it was incestuous. But what does he do? He ends up killing the boy and then doing exactly what he was doing to the girl, and then killing her and stuffing him in these holes. All the while, we have these other scenes come up about the military kind of hunting him down, trying to find him because he's dodging the draft. And then we know he kind of sets them up. There's a bunch of snakes in a hole, and they quickly decide that's a bad idea. At least the 2 of them come, one of them stays behind, as you know. And then he stuffs these 2 kids down there, and nobody ever finds them, because we know in the third story, Jake is still around. He's a lot older now, but he's kind of up to his arrowhead trading still. That's the only way he makes money, or trades for goods. But another thing I'd like to point out with the story is how it's comprised of these separate scenes, but they're kind of, they're not chronological. It feels like he's jumping forward and back, like remembering these chunks of time in an interesting way. So he'll be talking about these 2 kids having sex, and then the next thing he's talking about his childhood and how he came to be where he is, and then he's murdering them all of a sudden, and then he's having sex with the girl before he murders her. And then we get the story about the military. So it's this really weird collection. And to me, it really feels like an indication of this guy's mental state. Like, he's clearly not right in the head. And so he's kind of jumping around. And what I love about it, it almost speaks to the insignificance, or at least how he doesn't view these acts as very significant or profound like we would, right? And so it's just kind of intermixed. It's just like a day in the life sort of thing where he's like, oh yeah, that one time I did this. Oh, and there's other time I did that. And he's never really just dwelling on these things. And you can tell that like none of this has really affected him outside of the fact where he is trying to hide the body so he doesn't get caught. And again, at the beginning of this next scene, we have a great highlight here. I'd never been inside a real person before. And when I started to finish, it was like everything I'd ever known didn't matter no more. And I'm sure out there, you know what that feeling is like. And I love how he repeats what the lines that they were saying, Jesus save me, because I thought she might like that. And here we have a little bit of a highlight that was really indicative, at least to me, of baptism, maybe of biblical stories where, and the blood coming out of his mouth was turning the water the color of wine. I thought that was an interesting description there. And I feel like, considering it's followed by Jesus save me, even though we know why he was saying that, it feels like that is what he's alluding to. And so we find out Jake just gets off scot-free. The military finally gives up and he's just like, continues doing his thing. And here we come to the very end when he's talking about when he's sitting in front of Maud's store and watching the cars go by, and I'm dipping my finger into a can of something and smoothing it across some crackers. I can't help but think about them down there in Dynamite Hole. I like to picture in my head that that's where they play now, hiding under the water behind those dead rotten branches where the leeches hang black and shiny as jewels, beating their tiny hearts. And all the time I'm thinking it, I'm saying to myself, Jesus save me. Another amazing ending of another story, and it just keeps getting better. And so one thing I was asking myself at this point, are they all going to be hitting this hard? Are they all going to be this intense? We are answered by the third story, the very title of this collection, Knockemstiff, where we learn of a man named Hank. And this is kind of just a simple story. It's a day in the life of this man named Hank who works at this corner store essentially. And we're wondering, like, when are these stories going to come together? And it's finally when Jake shows up, our buddy Jake from the previous story. And he's trading his arrowheads still for money. And then we find out he steals, I think it was a can of beans or something. But I think the interesting thing about this is really it's the couple who come there to take photographs of the place. And it's like us sort of viewing them on the outside, right? They're this strange cast of characters in this tiny town, and we have these outsiders coming in. And I'm sure if you've ever gone on a road trip, you've felt the same way, where you go to a place and it's almost like an amusement park, right? You're observing these people in this place, almost like it's a zoo, I guess you could say. And so she's getting him to pose, and she's saying, "Okay," the woman says, "say Knockemstiff." And to me, this story really speaks of that fact, where you kind of wonder at first, like, is Hank going to be offended? Are the people going to be offended? And we know that Jake's like, running for the hills essentially, because he knows all the stuff he's done, and he's a little bit afraid of having his picture taken. We find out that Boo is someone that Hanks likes, and I have a highlight here. I know everything about her, and I wonder how long it will take me to forget that. And again, just beautiful lines in here that are just peppered throughout. So you'll be, reading about incest and murder, and then a line will just hit you like that. But back to what I was saying earlier, I kind of was thinking that maybe some of these characters might get offended, right? They might think, oh, you just kind of drive in here and you treat us like animals. You like to take pictures and go about your way as if you're kind of like laughing at them. But that doesn't really happen. Like he kind of humors them. They both do. And they just say, Knockemstiff, as they get their photo taken. And this is when they say it this final time, "All right," I say, and nod at the camera, "one more time." Then we say it together, Knockemstiff, and it almost sounds like it means something. Again, another one of those lines that really hits you. But if you go to the Wikipedia page, there's a couple of other entries in there too. Like here's one that claims a tremendous brawl broke out when the community was in its infancy. More humorous is the tale of a woman who confronted the preacher during a Sunday morning worship service, informing the clergyman that her husband was cheating on her. That's the one in the book. She wanted the preacher's advice, and his response was straightforward: Knockemstiff. And then there's a variant of the story that a preacher came across two women fighting over a man and advised the women that the man was not likely to be worth their trouble and someone should knock him stiff. And then here's another one that's interesting. It's also potentially another term for moonshine. And I think that's what's cool, is we have this very interesting name for this town, but we don't quite know the real story, and it almost makes it kind of a legend, right? And the very final paragraph, the woman tries to pay him for his trouble a couple bucks, but instead he asks her to send him one of the pictures. "One with me and the girl," I told her, and she promised that she would. "When it comes, I'll stick it up in the store through the day so that people can see it, and at night, I'll take it down." take what you will from that final line. Again, I love it. So these 3 stories, I have to confess that it was really hard to hold back. I blew through these very quickly because I was having such a good time with them. And they're pretty short. I think we're only on page 39. For next time, I'm thinking we check out the next 3, The Hair's Fate, Pills, and Gigantomachi. I don't even know how to pronounce that word, but I think it's a good pace for us to keep going through this. I know we're going to end a little bit sooner than 7 weeks, like I was talking about earlier, but I think that's okay. These are short. It's a very short book. These stories are just brimming with so much detail and interest from a character standpoint, just from a setting standpoint. I'm just curious to see where this collection goes. So thanks again for voting on this one. I'm so glad you guys wanted to read it as much as I did. I probably would have read it anyway if it wasn't chosen, but either way, thank you, and I hope you're enjoying it. Let me know in the comments if you are. Also, like this video if you liked it so other people can find it. And if you are now just joining us for the first time, it's not too late, right? We take these things pretty slow. And if you're finding this a long time from now, no worries. This will always be archived, this entire series. So hopefully it's a time capsule where people can read along with me in the future and make these great works a little bit more visible to the rest of you out there. Remember, 3 stories next week, and let me know what you thought in the comments, or let me know what you thought in the Discord, and I will see you then. All right, thanks.